The crash of Air India flight AI-171 was not just a tragedy that snuffed out 260 lives. That's the number, viewers, 260 people dead. It's now become a battleground for a vile, orchestrated smear campaign. Foreign media, led by the Wall Street Journal, are shamelessly pointing fingers at the dead pilots, Captain Sumit Savarwal and First Officer Clive Kunder, while shielding Boeing, the aircraft maker. Because this disgusting propaganda is thriving because India's Civil Aviation Ministry and the Aircraft Accident Investigation Bureau, the AAIB, are sitting on their hands, letting lies spread like wildfire. The pilots who can't defend themselves and the victims' families deserve better than this gutless, shameless silence. The Wall Street Journal's so-called report is an example of sleazy reporting, claiming Captain Sabarwal likely switched off the fuel flow based on cherry-picked cockpit voice recorder straps. They paint a picture of a calm captain and a panicked co-pilot, pushing a pilot error narrative without a shred of solid proof. Viewers, this is a hit job. The AAIB's own report, the one that dropped at midnight on July 12th, only mentions one pilot saying, why did you cut it off? And the other replying, no, I did not. Yet the Wall Street Journal spins this into a full-blown story, dripping with unverified details from unnamed sources. How did a foreign outlet get this sensitive information before Indians? And who's leaking it and why? Viewers, this looks like a case of the dead pilots being dragged through the mud to save a corporate giant's reputation. The Civil Aviation Ministry's silence is nothing short of a betrayal. They have left the door wide open for this kind of propaganda to fester. The AAIB's pathetic secretive report with no press conference or a follow-up is a joke. It's a joke, viewers. Why hide the full CVR transcript? Why let foreign media know more than the Indian public? How does the Wall Street Journal have details that India's own parliament or some of us don't have? The ministry's only press conference on June 14 was a farce. No questions allowed, no answers given. This is profound incompetence. Because the Indian Commercial Pilots Association and the Airline Pilots Association of India are livid, and rightly so, calling these reckless and sickening lies about pilot error an insult to the profession. They are right. Pilots go through brutal training and mental health checks. Throwing around suicide theories without evidence is pure evil. The unions are begging for a fair probe and, more importantly, a seat at the investigation table. But the AAIB ignores them, letting the smear campaign run wild. Viewers, why is India letting this happen? Is the ministry too spineless to stand up to Boeing or the FAA? Are they scared of rocking the boat with their global aviation dreams? Why are sensitive details slipping out? Someone needs to hold these agencies accountable and stop this shameful game. At the very least, the ministry and the AAIB must break their cowardly silence and fight back against this propaganda machine. The AAIB, just a short while ago, released another note saying that we don't agree with this kind of insinuation and half-truths, etc., etc. But that is not enough. Their silence emboldens this kind of misinformation campaign. Parvez Damania joining us, Jitendra Bhargav, Captain Meenu Wadia, founder president of the Federation of Indian Pilots, Ratan Sharda and Tushar Gupta, stay on. Captain Wadia, what do you make of what has been floating around, this misinformation campaign?
Even surprised that this is floating around. I am not surprised at all. And this, in fact, it started on the very first day and second day after the crash immediately. You saw some foreign media, supposed to be so-called specialists from the pilots in pilots' uniforms, talking utter rubbish, saying that this crash happened. And they said, we have absolute proof, and this is exactly what happened. The pilot, instead of raising the gear, he raised the flaps, and that's why the crash happened. Something else, they said the pilot did this to the switch, etc., and that happened. Why have the Western media, and especially the American media, gone out of their way to give false information? And you will be now surprised to hear something from me today. Only this morning, on one of the media, I saw my photograph, and as if I am saying, as a specialist, that it is the captains who switched the fuel levers off immediately after takeoff. Can you imagine? I wish I could find out who's put this on my name and my photograph on the media. So this is not surprising at all. This is bound to happen.
That is shocking, Captain Wadia. Who are these people? Let's find out, identify, and take them to court, because if we let them be, this will embolden them. Jitendra Bhargav. Mr. Bhargav, what do you make of this, this free-for-all kind of situation where everyone is now an expert, people are saying what they want?
Yeah, exactly. People have been doing it, and part of the blame must be taken by the Indian authorities too. Well, first is, what was the preliminary report? It was a sequence of events. In the foreword, it categorically states this is not to apportion blame or liability. Very clearly, of course, there were some points given out, and people have drawn their own conclusion from it to look at it. There is a mischief element in it. There's no denying the fact. It would have been wonderful, as you very rightly said, if instead of releasing the preliminary report in the early hours of the day, there was a proper formal release of the report where people could get their questions answered and clarifications given. So it would have led to less speculation. Now, what we are witnessing is that Western media, led by Wall Street Journal, is trying to give out a certain theory based on that small clip from the black box that came out in the preliminary report and drawn their own conclusions. Now, there have been umpteen examples where the final analysis and final report have varied totally from the preliminary report. And as the report very clearly stated, that we are not getting into details. Detailed analysis, comments, evidences will be collected after the release of the preliminary report. So there was simply no reason.
Right.
The only motive one can ascribe is this an attempt to protect Boeing? So
Let's put that to Mr. Damania. Mr. Damania, is this an attempt to protect Boeing?
This is not only an attempt to protect Boeing, it's an attempt to protect GE, Boeing and Honeywell. Up till now, the switch, I'm sure everybody must be aware, is manufactured by Honeywell, which is also a $35 billion company. Nobody has questioned them on the malfunction of the switch. Now, I don't understand in what authority Wall Street Journal has to pass comments like this. At what position? Today, the External Affairs Ministry also has said that this is a preliminary report and we should not jump to conclusion and we should wait till the final report comes. I think this is, the pilots are the people who are the easiest to blame. You can't take upon Boeing. Nobody can take upon Boeing. Even the American government can't take upon Boeing. You can't take upon GE, which is a multi-billion, now trillion-dollar corporation. You can't take on Honeywell. So who are the people you blame it on? Indirectly, the pilots. Now, I heard that the Pilots Association is also planning to go to court against Wall Street Journal. They should be supported and encouraged so such nonsense reports don't come. And sometimes I've seen even channels having these foreign pilots in uniform talking all this nonsense and indirectly implying that the pilots are responsible. These pilots were highly experienced, very well trained.
Right. You're talking about Captain Steve. Jitendra Bhargav was also mentioning. In fact, I spoke to Captain Steve on this channel, but that conversation was just after the accident when his video had gone viral, and I had him in good faith. But what happened after that interview? He released another video, and then he's been dealing in multiple theories. So you're right. You are right about it. But you see, how did it start? This midnight report that was dropped by the AAIB. Why did it have selective, things about the CVR, that one pilot said this, the other said it? If you're not sure, or if you're not in a position to release the full transcript, why get into these things?
No, and plus on the last page, the second last paragraph says that no evidence has been found against Boeing and GE engines. Now, there was absolutely no need to put that. If you read the line by line, it says at this stage of investigation, there is no recommended action against Boeing 787, GE engine 1B and X. That means in a very indirect way, you said that Boeing is no way responsible. You see, if you read in between lines, you will have read this through, they've indirectly eliminated every point. They've eliminated the point of weather. They've eliminated the point of protocol formed before the pilot took off. They've also eliminated, they said there was a snag when the plane landed from Delhi to Ahmedabad. The engineering team corrected the snag and the pilot signed it. I mean, they've indirectly said that none of the external factors that we were originally talking of, which were responsible for the crash, are all eliminated. So ultimately, it somewhere implies indirectly that the human error is coming, Now, they also talk of the switch transition from there to there, So I think there are a lot of grace doubts, but nobody's talking that if the pilots didn't physically put off the switch, there must have been some electronic or mechanical malfunction by which the fuel supply stopped to the engine. So in a way, Boeing needs to be investigated.
No, Boeing has to be investigated, but who will answer for AAIB? Tushar Gupta, AAIB operates from some other time zone. What is this practice of dropping a report in the dead of the night, 1:15?
Pranesh, and I'm saying this is a big if the airlines or the investigating body were to say that there was indeed a dual engine failure, which many aviation experts cited at the day of the crash and the weeks after, it would have been the dual engine failure at the lowest altitude in the history of airplanes. That is what is at stake here. I do not understand what was the timing of the report. I do not understand the context of the report. I do not understand why it was released at the time and in a manner where there was no clarification from the agencies investigating the crash. If you're putting in the report that the pilot asked the other pilot, have you switched off the fuel switches? And the other pilot says no, you're already sowing this entire doubt, this entire narrative in the Western media that maybe the pilots are responsible. But in the end of the report, what do you write? You write there are no recommendations for Boeing or the engine makers, essentially giving them both a clean sheet. So where does the blame fall at? To the two pilots who are not here amongst us to defend themselves. And that is exactly what has happened. Forget Wall Street Journal, Reuters, CNN. All of them have been running the same narrative for weeks now, that this was somehow the pilot's responsibility.
Which is why we are calling this a hate job. Ratan Sharda, what do you make of this?
First of all, let me make some very personal point. Mr. Sabharwal lived in my colony, and he was a very lovable person, very affable people. Hundreds of people knew him. He had a wonderful family. He was a tough Air Force pilot with 15,000 hours of flying. So to make insinuation against a dead person who sacrificed his life because of some stupid failure of the Boeing. Now, coming further, everybody is talking about AIB by saying change the team. A stupid kind of report, half-baked report is released for whom? It released to a major release for Boeing, for the Washington people sitting there. For whom was it released? Why it was not vetted properly? That is one. Secondly, the Boeing was in the Senate, the Boeing was seen being badgered by the Senate members, and he had no answers. He confessed to every crime that an airline can do. Still it is surviving because Boeing is what in English called knock of USA, for whom your president lobbies. Wherever he goes, he lobbies for the Boeing. And this Boeing, you remember 737 MAX was grounded. 3 big air crashes, 346 died. Was any action taken against Boeing? Was that also fault of for the airline? And the parody of a person whom everybody called believing Gora ko chacha bolega, how can he be made an authority? So there was already a lobby working to defend Boeing, and by our own AIB playing to the gallery. I think that panel itself, has to be thrown out and a new panel should be made. And 32 seconds, you just scored 2 seconds. Where is the other 30 seconds? So did the pilot just rise and say, "Arey, switch band ho aur so gaye"? I mean, what kind of report is this?
No, so let me ask this. It's a little uncomfortable, but it's a genuine question. Has someone else written this report for the AAIB? What do you think, Captain Wadia? Has this been fed?
Yes, let me give you a lot of information about the AAIB and why this has come about in this stage. Most people may not be aware of the past. First of all major countries in the world who have a good record on aviation safety have an independent safety board. Now, I personally and my Federation of Indian Pilots have been fighting for the last 50 years, including writing to the Prime Minister of India and various agencies, that India, we must have an independent safety board. I am very happy, at least now, that there's been some progress. It is still not an independent safety board. AAIB is not an independent safety board, but at least there's some progress in the right direction. So one second, let me give you more information on this also. Because first of all, who obstructed this? Who didn't want this an independent safety board? The DGCA of India did not want to have an independent safety board because they did not wish to be questioned on any mistakes that they made. I'll give you a big example. Right when the Chakri-Dadri mid-air collision that took place, if you remember, mid-air collision, we had forecasted that collision in writing, informed the government that this will happen, you will have a mid-air collision, and gave them solutions to sort that problem out also. They did nothing. And a mid-air
you're right,
collision
Captain
took place.
Wadia. There are several such concerns, and it doesn't end here. But like I said in the beginning, at the very least, the government must be proactive in countering this misinformation, toolkit, whatever you want to call it. We can't have a situation where, it's a free-for-all. Jisko jo man mein aaye, kuch bhi bol, the pilots are not here to defend themselves. It's a disservice that we're doing, not just to the two pilots who are dead, but to our aviation pride, India's aviation sector. We'll have to wrap this. I thank you, gentlemen, for joining us. The news hour with Navita Kumar on the other side.